Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to today's edition of Intuitive Angling. And man, I really appreciate you guys spending some time with me and checking out the video. Always very grateful for that. And guys, today we're going to be talking about everything you need to know about pond fishing. I think a lot of times I get in the habit here of the channel of just talking about big public bodies of water, big lakes, boat fishing, that type of stuff. And I forget that a bunch of people out there fish ponds and wade creeks. They don't have boats. And that's the way I started too, man. I started fishing ponds and wading creeks for years. That's all I did. So I've got a ton of experience that I want to pass along with you guys, specifically on fishing ponds. So we're going to get into that in today's video. Also, guys, just a quick invitation out there. I'd like to invite everybody, if you haven't had a chance, to please hit that subscribe button here at Intuitive Angling. That's a good way to support the channel. And also, anyone interested in booking an on-the-water lesson, you can do so by going to my Facebook page, Randy Blockett Professional Angler, and just shoot me a private message for information. So much appreciated with that. Okay, guys, pond fishing. I want to start out. I want to start from the first thing you have to do with pond fishing up until how you actually catch the fish on it. So when you're talking about ponds, the first thing that you have to do, and the most important thing you have to do, is you have to find a pond to fish, and you have to get permission to fish that pond. I do not suggest doing what I did when I was a kid all the time, because I snuck into ponds all the time and I got ran out of ponds all the time. I've gotten run off with guys coming after me with shotguns, guys trying to run me down with their trucks across the field when I was 13, 14 years old. You don't want to do that because, man, it's just stressful, and it's probably not the best thing to do as far as having a good pond fishing experience. But the thing that you do need is once you do find some ponds, you got to get permission. And one of the best ways to find a good pond to fish is the area that you live at. Just go drive out in the countryside and look at some open farm areas out there that's got some ponds. And once you do find them, try to find the property owners and simply just ask permission. And one of the best ways that you can get permission to fish a pond is let the owners know that you're not going to keep any fish. You're just fishing for fun. You're not going to leave any trash. You're going to be respectful of the property. And more times than not, they'll let you fish, under those conditions. Some of them won't. Some of them just don't want anyone there. And I can understand that because I've had ponds myself. So one of the biggest challenges is actually finding a pond to fish. Now, once you do find a pond to fish, the next thing you have to figure out is the best way to approach that pond. Not all farm ponds are created the same, because when I talk about ponds, I'm talking about basically just small bodies of water that you can walk around. And some of them are actually pits. You got strip pits, which I can sort of consider ponds. Then you have the traditional farm pond that's actually there to, so cows can drink out of it. And then you've got everything in between. Now, the farm pond, the biggest factor that you're going to have in a farm pond is the water visibility, as far as your approach to that farm pond, and how you need to fish it and the productivity of it. Because some ponds out there they're not running cows on it, so you don't have these muddy banks where the cows have been in there drinking and pooping and all that type of stuff. Some farm ponds are a little bit cleaner. They're more like just miniature lakes. And then some of them are rocky, and you got anything from a mud pit pond where there's cows in it to a clear water pond or pit that has visibility of over 10 feet. So what I sort of want to do is to talk about the techniques and approaches based upon your water clarity, because the water clarity is going to dictate so much about how you approach that pond. And also, when you're talking about pond sizes, some ponds, they're big enough to require a boat. So if you have a pond that that you feel that there's structure that you can't reach from the shoreline, sometimes it's best to try to get a little, like a 12-foot flat bottom or something out there, or canoe or whatever, to get out off the bank a little bit to hit some of those offshore areas. Because a lot of times, if a farm pond isn't real deep, some of the best fishing can be out in the middle part of the pond if it's a fairly large pond. But for the most part, the ponds that I'm talking about are the ones that you can walk around and you can fish around the whole thing yourself here. So let's talk a little bit about how to approach the pond based upon the water clarity and bank angle. I classify ponds in several different classifications. The first classification would be the true hardcore farm pond that is there to water cows. The notoriety or really the common thread with a farm pond that has, that is geared for, watering cows, is the banks are flat and the water's dirty. Most of the time the water visibility in those ponds can be less than 12 inches in visibility, and the banks have been trampled down with cow prints, depending upon how big the pond is and how many cows there are. These can still be very productive, ponds in that aspect. And the number one approach and the number one lure for a dirty water pond is a small spinnerbait. Now, one piece of advice I'll give you in fishing farm ponds, guys, you're gonna catch a lot more fish and even big fish by going to smaller lures, because there's something about the relative size of the lake or pond versus the size of lures that are more productive. It's like big lakes that are 30, 40,000 acres. You can catch fish on those things on big swim baits and glide baits and big lures, but a farm pond, for whatever reason, even if there's big fish in that farm pond, they prefer smaller baits. So if you have dirty water, like water visibility over a foot, the number one pond lure is a small spinnerbait. And usually I like a 1/4 ounce to a 3/8 ounce. I'll either use a single Colorado, like a single number 4 Colorado, or a double willow leaf, and maybe a number 3 or 4 size blades. If the water visibility is muddy, I'll go with the Colorado. If it's more up to like that 12 inches of visibility, sometimes I'll go to a willow leaf. And also, guys, I'll put together a list of my favorite pond lures, and I'll link them in the description of this video through my Tackle Warehouse link if you guys are interested in picking up some of my favorite pond lures. So small spinnerbait is going to be really good. Another good one that people don't fish, guys, is a Beetle Spin. A Beetle Spin, the old school Bass Buster Beetle Spin, it's a great pond lure. Even I've caught a bunch of 4-pound bass on a little Beetle Spin. But the small spinnerbait is my number one pond lure for most any situation out there. Now, the way that I like to fish it, and here's one of the things you need to realize about farm ponds that have flat banks on them. A lot of times grass goes right up to the shore, or it can be mud if there's a lot of cows there. Get close to the bank, and a lot of times I'll even get in the water, if I can, make long casts parallel to the bank, shallow, because what these farm pond fish position differently than lakes. A true farm pond bass, let's say the bank is right here, the bank's sloping off like this, and here's the bass. The bass position looking up at the bank, because on a farm pond, these bass are used to like grasshoppers and bugs and snakes and frogs jumping into the water. So they're always positioned looking at the bank out there. That's why you want to cast close to the bank and even like 12 inches of water with that spinnerbait. That's going to be a really, really good way to catch them. Chatterbait could also be good in those situations, but in a dirty pond situation, I'm using a spinnerbait or chatterbait almost all the time. I'm usually not fishing any slow baits or topwaters or crankbaits like that. It's all about spinnerbait. It's all about finding that right blade size and the right color for that. And usually I'll just walk all the way around the pond, just casting parallel, also hitting any visible targets. If there's any wood or anything visible off the bank, I'll try to hit that as well. Now, the next scenario is when you got a little bit cleaner water. So if you've got water visibility, say 1.5 to 3 feet, that opens up another lure category out there. The spinnerbait is still going to be really good, but it's not going to be like an all-day deal. It's going to be like early and late in the day when you got some shade coming off the bank. Once the shade comes off the bank, if you've got like 1.5 to 3 foot of water visibility in your pond, there's 2 lures that are going to be really good. Number one is going to be a plastic worm, just an old school Texas rig 8-inch ribbon-tailed worm, something like that. Normally in a darker color, like a black or a June bug or a plum. Light sinker, like an 1/8 ounce or a 3/8 ounce sinker. And the same way, guys, just make parallel casts down the bank and just work that worm. Start out like maybe that far off the bank and then work your way farther off the bank. Make parallel casts with that and just work that worm, right down the bank there. There's something about a old school Texas rig worm in a farm pond that just catches tons of bass out there. Extremely productive. Now, if the water is a little bit warmer, say it's summertime, water temperatures are over 65, 70, or warmer degrees, a small buzzbait is going to be really good. Buzzbait and a spinnerbait are 2 of the top lures for pond fishing. I'll tell you another thing about pond fishing, guys. If you have that water visibility that's closer to the 3 foot visibility, ponds are great to fish at night. I mean, you'll catch, sort of like a regular lake out there, you'll catch twice as many fish at night on a farm pond than you will during the daytime. That's when, and the reason I know that is once I got caught sneaking into farm ponds during the daytime, we started sneaking into them at night. So I got real good at catching fish at night. And like a black spinnerbait or a black buzzbait fished at night on a farm pond, it'll get your arm broke, man. It'll catch you some good fish with that. So the Texas rig worm, buzzbait are my two selections for up to 3 foot of visibility. If you've got clean ponds, now the ponds that are like strip pits, or for some reason you got some ponds that don't have a lot of nutrients coming into them, or a lot of runoff, or you don't have any cows, some farm ponds can be pretty clear, especially if they have vegetation. If you have water visibility that is like 3.5 or 4 foot of visibility or greater, the number one lure that you're gonna have is a Cinco or a soft plastic stick bait. Normally I rig it Texas rigged without any weight out there. Same type of deal, guys. Parallel to the bank, let that thing sink really slow and just work it back in. It's just, that is the number one lure in a pond if you have clear water out there. It's a pretty simple selection out there. Now, the main thing about a pond is like every pond is gonna be different as far as the diversity of cover that it has. Some ponds are gonna have grass that are growing right along the bank. Some ponds are gonna have some laydowns on them. You may have some riprap on the bank. So you have to approach each pond. Some are gonna have lily pads even. Each pond is gonna be different in terms of the structure you have available. But for the most part in ponds, those fish are gonna be target oriented around any visible shallow cover that you have. Another good bait in a pond is if you got 3 foot of water visibility or less, and if the pond has a lot of wood in it, like a lot of blow down trees, or say there's been trees that fell off the bank, is flipping just an old school black and blue jig in those laydowns is going to be really good. Black and blue is a really good pond color because the pond fish usually don't see a lot of lures, and that's the best color to use on a low pressured lake. So that's going to be really good with that. But the main thing you have to determine on a pond is if you need to have a boat, or if you can fish that pond effectively from the bank, or even if you have an access to boat. You're always going to be better if you can't like cast across your pond, or if the banks are a little bit steeper or they're harder to access. It's always going to be better to have a boat. And I would suggest something like a 12-foot flat bottom with just a little 12-volt trolling motor, just some little small trolling motor that enables you to get out, off the bank a little bit more. Now, this is especially important on like your strip pits, because strip pits tend to be a lot steeper and they're very difficult to fish off the bank. So most any time that I fished a strip pit, I had like a little 10-foot canoe with me, and I'd take my little 10-foot canoe to fish out off the bank with the strip pits on there. Really helps if you have a trolling motor, because a canoe with a paddle is a terrible boat to fish out of. But the main thing, guys, keep it simple. The main things I want to leave you with here is on ponds, cast parallel to the bank. Remember that the fish in ponds, for the most part, live shallower than they do lakes. Spinnerbait, soft plastic stick bait, buzzbait are going to be your best lures on almost any pond out there. Any lure will catch a fish, don't get me wrong, but for some reason I have not caught that many fish on crankbaits in ponds. Something about it, they just love the spinnerbait out there. So anyway, guys, it's great. It's usually better fishing than lakes if you don't want to fight the crowd, if you don't want to have to deal with live scoping and all that type of stuff. Old school pond fishing is so fun, and I'd highly encourage it. So hope it helps out, guys. We'll see you later.